Have you ever wanted to be unshakable? Not cold or numb, just deeply grounded. The kind of person who stays centered no matter what life throws at them. Maybe you've spent years crafting this version of yourself. Powerful, in control, successful. And it works until it doesn't. One unexpected blow and suddenly all that strength feels like smoke. You're left wondering, what happened to the strong version of me? This is where so many people get stuck. On the surface, they look solid. But inside, emotional chaos. The truth is, the identity you've been projecting isn't really you. It's a defense mechanism, a mask built to perform, to cope, to survive. But here's the twist. That mask doesn't protect you from pain. It just hides you from it. So when real pain punches through, not only does it hurt, it leaves you lost because you've never actually faced it. Ever noticed how the strongest people are often the ones who've been shattered before? That's not random. Pain has a strange power. It can crack you wide open, and if you're brave enough to stay open, something real starts to emerge. Not ego, not illusion, something deeper. And from there, a different kind of strength is born, not the strength that makes you invincible, the kind that makes you free. But here's the price: your illusions. You have to let go of the act, the armor, the lie that I'm fine. Because that's where the real transformation begins. If that resonates with you, go ahead and hit subscribe. Thanks for supporting the channel. Falling apart doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've been standing on shaky ground, and no one ever taught you how to build anything sturdier. From an early age, you were trained to succeed, to perform, to produce, to win. But no one showed you how to actually feel, how to process heartbreak, how to sit with sadness without running. So you tied your identity to achievement. And for a while, it worked. Results made you feel worthy. Praise felt like oxygen. But the moment that performance slips, the entire structure crumbles, and you're left exposed. That's why failure doesn't just sting, it devastates. Because it's not just about the failure, it's about the void that follows. If I'm not succeeding, who the hell am I? Carl Jung said it best: the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, it will tell you. And that's what happens. You start living out a version of yourself that isn't really you. It's a social costume, carefully tailored for acceptance, admiration, applause. And the longer you wear it, the more disconnected you become. At first, it's a subtle ache, a quiet discomfort, but eventually it turns into collapse. And yes, that collapse hurts, but it also matters because pain shakes you awake. It forces you to ask a question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Who am I without the mask? This isn't a thought exercise. It's a raw experience. You have to feel your way into it, not with logic, with presence. And in that space, stripped of all roles, you start to meet yourself. Not the version the world applauds, but the one who's quietly been waiting underneath it all. That's where healing begins. Not by fixing yourself, but by finally seeing yourself, maybe for the very first time. Most people don't change until they have no choice. You tell yourself you'll slow down, take it easy, breathe. You promise you'll be kinder to yourself. You'll rest. You even block out the weekend, light some candles. put on a podcast about balance. But then what happens? You feel a little better, and boom, you're back in it. Back grinding, back proving, back pushing harder than ever. Why? Because the discomfort of slowing down feels worse than the burnout. And that's the catch no one talks about. You're not addicted to achievement. You're addicted to escape. You're not chasing goals. You're running from yourself, from the silence, from the stillness, from the buried things that only come up when there's nothing left to distract you. Busyness becomes a form of anesthesia. You call it productivity, discipline, hustle. But sometimes it's just a way to not feel. You fill your schedule, not because you love what you're doing, but because empty space terrifies you. Because in that space, you'd have to face the truth that maybe, just maybe, all this effort isn't about building a future, it's about surviving the present. And deep down, you know you're burning out. You can feel your soul fraying at the edges, but you keep going because the alternative, slowing down and facing what's underneath, feels unbearable. What would happen if you stopped? What would you discover in the silence? And worse, what if you found out that all this proving and chasing was never really about you, but about a version of you that was shaped by fear, not love? Here's the brutal truth. If you don't stop willingly, life will stop you. Your body will start whispering through fatigue and anxiety. Then it'll scream through sickness and collapse. Your relationships will suffer. People will drift away. You'll find yourself surrounded by admiration, but starving for connection. Your spirit will quietly start to rot under the pressure of pretending. And when it all breaks, and it will, you'll think it's the end, but it's not. That crash, it's a message, a mercy disguised as a breakdown. It's your inner world saying, please, finally, come home. Come home to the parts of you that have been screaming in silence. Come home to the child who never felt safe unless they were performing. Come home to your worth without the resume. This is where transformation actually starts. Not in the hustle, but in the ruins of what hustle couldn't fix. Because only when everything falls apart do you see what was never real to begin with, and what remains might finally be the real you. The one who doesn't need to prove, the one who can finally rest, the one who knows you were never broken, you were just tired of pretending. Real change doesn't come from reading quotes or setting goals. It comes from collapse, from moments so raw, so painful, they tear through the layers you've spent years protecting. You lose the job. They leave. Your body gives out. You hit the wall, and everything you thought was holding you together unravels. That's when you finally realize you weren't living. You were just maintaining, keeping the peace, keeping up, keeping yourself busy enough not to notice how hollow it all felt. But now you can't ignore it. The pain is loud. The silence is louder. This is what people call rock bottom. But really, it's the first honest moment you've had in years. Because pain doesn't lie. It strips away. Everything falls. It forces you to look, not out there, but in here. And what you see might terrify you. The fear, the shame, the version of yourself you've kept buried because it wasn't polished enough, strong enough, lovable enough. But here's the thing, that broken version of you, that's the real one, and that's the one who actually heals. Not the persona, not the achiever, not the people pleaser, or the perfectionist. Only the real you can do the work. And the work begins when there's nothing left to pretend with. That's why suffering is sacred, because it ends the performance. It drags you out of the illusion and into the truth. And the truth is, you've been building a life that looks good on the outside, but quietly destroys you on the inside. So now what? You sit in the ashes. You grieve the mask. You stop running. You stop blaming the world for not giving you peace, and finally admit you never gave it to yourself. And in that moment, not the moment where everything's fixed, but the moment where you stop hiding, something shifts. You don't feel strong. You don't feel ready. You just feel real. That's the beginning. Not glamorous, not viral, just honest. You start to rebuild from the ground up, not based on expectations or applause, but on what actually matters. A quiet kind of freedom shows up, not because life got easier, but because you stopped abandoning yourself to survive it. And eventually, when someone asks you how you changed, you won't say, "I read this great book." You'll say, "I broke and decided to build something real." Healing is not what you think it is. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about finding yourself beneath all the things you did to survive. You don't go on some heroic journey to become whole. You already are. But you've been layered over and over with noise, with masks, with stories that never belonged to you in the first place. Your childhood taught you to shrink. Your culture taught you to chase. Your pain taught you to numb. And somewhere in that mess, you started confusing protection with identity. But let's get something straight. You are not your wounds. You are not your achievements. You are not what they did to you. And you are damn sure not who you had to become just to be accepted. The healing starts when you stop negotiating with your truth. When you stop asking, "Is this version of me lovable enough?" and start asking, "What part of me have I been exiling just to survive?" Because that's the tragedy. We spend years editing ourselves for people who don't even see us. We mold, we adapt, we perform, we get applause, but feel empty. We get love, but it's conditional. We get peace, but it's temporary. And all along there's this quiet voice, buried beneath the noise, whispering, "Come home." Not home to some fantasy life, not to some perfect version of you who never gets triggered or anxious or scared, but to the part of you that's always been waiting, the scared child, the angry teenager, the exhausted adult, all versions of you who are never fully held. Healing isn't about deleting those parts. It's about inviting them in, not to take over, but to be acknowledged, to be understood, to be forgiven. Because the truth is, you don't grow by rejecting your past. You grow by integrating it. You sit with your story without rushing to rewrite it. You stop labeling your emotions as too much. You stop calling yourself broken for feeling deeply. You stop trying to be healed enough to be loved. You are love. You are enough. You are whole. Even when you're crying at 2 a.m., even when you relapse, even when you forget everything you learned and feel like a failure all over again. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means nothing is exiled. It means your darkness belongs just as much as your light. And one day, you'll look back and realize the things you were most ashamed of, the parts you tried hardest to hide, were actually the keys. Keys to empathy, keys to wisdom, keys to a version of strength that isn't about pretending, but about embracing. That's what healing really is. Not a destination, not a goal, but a relationship with yourself. Messy, honest, ongoing. And if you stick with it, if you keep choosing truth over comfort, presence over performance, compassion over control, you'll realize something powerful. You were never broken. You were just buried. And now, finally, you're digging yourself out. This is the part nobody tells you. You don't heal to become someone else. You heal to return to who you were before the world told you to perform, to prove, to pretend. You're not some broken mess that needs fixing. You're not some half-person waiting for a better version of yourself to be born. No, you are already whole, already worthy, already home, if you just stop running. But here's the problem. Most of us are terrified of silence because silence has no distractions. And without distractions, you're forced to sit with the thing you've been avoiding your entire life. Yourself, not the curated self, not the social media version, not the one with goals, plans, routines, and answers, just you, raw, quiet, confused, the parts you buried under ambition, the parts you numbed with people, with praise, with productivity. Because somewhere along the way, the world taught you something dangerous, that your worth depends on what you do, that if you're not useful, you're disposable, that if you're not impressive, you're invisible. So you became a shapeshifter, smiling through pain, performing through grief, winning at life while losing yourself. And you got good at it, too good. You earned degrees, built careers, gathered followers, checked all the boxes, but inside, empty, anxious, disconnected, because deep down you knew this version of you was built for applause, not for truth. And truth doesn't care about applause. It's inconvenient, unfiltered, sometimes brutal. But it will always set you free if you're brave enough to face it. So here's your truth. You are not here to impress. You are not here to hustle for your worth. You are not here to fix what society convinced you was broken. You are here to remember. Remember the girl who laughed without checking if she looked pretty. The boy who cried without apologizing. The child who asked why instead of pretending to know. That version of you, before shame, before rejection, before the conditioning, that's your truth. That's your essence. That's who you were always meant to be. And I know the world didn't make it safe to stay that way. So you built walls. You wore masks. You survived. But you're not surviving anymore. You're waking up. You're digging. You're remembering. And maybe that's the real journey. Not becoming something new, but returning to something ancient. A self that was never lost, only silenced. And when you find that self again, not everyone will understand. People will say you've changed. People will get uncomfortable. People might leave. Let them. Because anyone who only loved the edited version of you doesn't deserve the real one. This is your life, not your parents' dream, not your partner's expectation, not society's checklist. Yours. You don't need permission to rest. You don't need permission to feel. You don't need permission to walk away from things that numb your soul. You're allowed to be new. You're allowed to be wild. You're allowed to stop running and start remembering. And if that scares people, let it. Because your healing is not a performance. It's a reclamation, and it's sacred. So take the mask off. Say the thing. Feel the grief. Tell the truth. Be misunderstood. Be real. Because at the end of the day, no one is coming to rescue you. You are the home you've been searching for. And now, finally, you're walking back through your own door.